kind of thin. That biogas, if we can capture it and use it as an energy source, it's very valuable. If we just let it go into the air, it's a pollutant. So farms that take a open manure pit and they convert it into a digester, or they add a digester before that manure pit, they can get double credit in the carbon intensity scoring of their energy, and that's really valuable. So people are actually investing in those projects quite a bit in the West.
In this episode of Voices from the Field, NCAT Northeast Coordinator and Agriculture Specialist Chris Lent talks to Matt Steiman, the Farm Energy and Livestock Manager at Dickinson College Organic Farm in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. They're talking about the farm's new farm-scale biodigester. A farm-based biodigester can turn cow manure and food waste into natural gas to produce electricity for the farm to use and to sell to the utility grid. Matt and Chris discuss Matt's research over the past 14 years on turning waste streams into biofuels and how that research led to the new biodigester's design and its installation at the farm. The discussion covers the unusual scale of the project, which was designed to manage the manure from 150 dairy cows and up to 3 tons of food waste daily. The project is meant to demonstrate to mid-sized farms across Pennsylvania and elsewhere that it is possible to manage waste streams in an environmentally sound way by transforming them into a source of carbon-neutral energy. Let's listen.
Hi, I'm Chris Lent, Agriculture Specialist for the National Center for Appropriate Technology. I live and work out of Pennsylvania, and I'm actually part of the Northeast office of NCAT. In this episode of Voices from the Field, I'm speaking with Matt Steiman of Dickinson College Organic Farm, which is in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And we're talking about biodigesters and on-farm production of natural gas. And in particular, we're going to be covering a mid-scale farm-size biodigester project that's installed at the Dickinson College Organic Farm that Matt is overseeing. So Matt, thanks for taking the time to be with us today. I really appreciate that. And I was wondering if you could just give us a brief introduction of yourself and Dickinson College Organic Farm, which I mentioned, and your role there, a bit about your role at the farm.
Well, hi, Chris, and hi, everybody. It's my great pleasure to be with you today, and thanks for the opportunity. So I am the Energy and Livestock Projects Manager here at the College Farm. I have been working in agriculture since the early 90s. Started out as a vegetable farmer and then gradually got interested in energy systems. Worked for a long time in biodiesel as well as solar projects. And I took over livestock responsibilities here in about 2011, 2012. Just a bit of background on the College Farm. We are a working farm. We have a 90-acre property. Our main economic driver is certified organic produce. So we plant about 10 acres of produce here, organic vegetables of all sorts for a CSA, as well as the college dining hall and a farmer's market. And then we raise grass-fed beef, grass-fed lamb, and pastured poultry for eggs. And we have an on-farm composting program. We've been composting commercial food waste from the Dickinson College cafeteria since 2008. So we have like a windrow composting system. And then we've got a wide variety of renewable energy projects. Solar used to be into biodiesel and small biogas. And then as well as being a working farm, we're a educational program. We host apprentices. We do a lot of faculty interactions with courses on the farm, some student research projects. We have our own independent research as well as collaborative research with different agencies, as well as faculty here from the college. And then we provide an outreach function, in the sustainable agriculture community. We're a big part of PASA Sustainable Agriculture, and we enjoy sharing what we learn here, what we develop with other farmers so that they can have access to sustainability technology. My role is I'm the Energy and Livestock Projects Manager. So I supervise those things. I also work in the shop and I support the vegetable farm. I've been, you know, working on this biogas stuff for over 10 years now, and I'm the project manager for the expansion to the commercial biodigester here at Dickinson.
Yeah, that's a busy life you lead down there. I had the opportunity to come down and visit you recently, and I've been on the farm a couple of times now, and it's really a beautiful farm, beautifully run, and I really appreciated the opportunity to be down there. Farm energy is one of your purviews there at the college. What got you moving in the direction, or what hooked you on the work on anaerobic digesters and production of biogas with them?
Yeah, so as I said earlier, we used to make a lot of biodiesel, and biodiesel is it's a fuel you can use to run tractors and trucks and diesel cars, made from used cooking oil. So I was pretty heavily involved in that for quite a while. When you make biodiesel, you end up with a glycerin byproduct, and we were always interested in the fuel, so that was our focus. But it turns out for every 5 gallons of biodiesel that you generate, you end up with about 1 gallon of this crude glycerin byproduct. So as part of our work trying to improve the environmental footprint of biodiesel production, we started looking into things that we could do with the glycerin byproduct, and that led us to anaerobic digestion. Or anaerobic digestion systems are a one reasonable outlet for biodiesel glycerin, and so we started exploring that on kind of a research scale. Tinkering literally with like 2-liter jugs of manure and glycerin in the farmhouse basement was kind of where we got started. And I, early on was just fascinated with this idea of, I can generate energy from farm waste. So really, on my work time, but also on my own time, started exploring small scale anaerobic digestion systems, and really cut the bug pretty quick. Once you see that you can make burnable gas from cow manure or sheep manure and other waste products around the farm, it gets pretty exciting. So I think we made our first cup of tea and made our first bacon and eggs cooked on biogas in 2010 on a small scale project that I built with a student. Then we started developing lab exercises for the environmental studies department, and some small scale research digesters of the 2 to 3 gallon size. And just been tinkering with that for quite a while. In 2011, we built our first small production digester. This was one that was big enough to make gas that we could cook with in the house. So we have a farmhouse here on the farm, as well as apprentice kitchen. And so we started using biogas just as a cooking fuel on the farm. As we doubled down on that, in 2015, we built a larger digester, like a pilot scale digester. And we were making so much gas that we actually exceeded the cooking needs of the farm. So even though we also do commercial cooking here, like we make pickles and tomato sauce and things, we were actually making more biogas than we needed for those applications. And so we looked at, well, can we power a log splitter? Can we power a generator? And that led us to explore expanding the digester system to one that we can make electricity with. And I'll get back into that in a second. I did start down the path of the science path here. In 2017, I went back to school to get a master's degree in environmental pollution control. That was through Penn State University Harrisburg campus. They have an environmental engineering program there, and my research for that program was the co-digestion of brewer spent grain from a local brewery with cow manure. And so we developed a suite of research digesters for that. At the same time, we started exploring expansion of our pilot scale digester into the commercial scale one that we're building right now. And so that's kind of a little bit of my story.
That's quite a progression from starting from a very small couple gallon pilot to what we're going to be talking about here in a little while, to a large farm scale size digester. But I think that's what I was going to ask you about the research, and you touched on that in your last answer there. But I should say that there is a Dickinson College Farm biogas blog page that kind of describes the progression of the project as that we're going to be talking about here, and it also includes the research that you've done in the past and at Dickinson over the years, and it talks about fertilizer trials using the byproducts of the digestion process and all of those possibilities as well. There's some excellent informational videos on there as well. We'll put a link to that page in the notes of this podcast. But I think
Thanks.
that's yeah, sure, that's what hooks people on the farm scale, like small farm scale, is the idea that you could take the waste products that you were like you were talking about and actually utilize them to cook meals for the family or maybe the workers on the farm, and that's such an attractive idea to a lot of people, and I love that scale of anaerobic digestion, to be able to utilize that on the farm. But that's more of a micro scale, and what we're talking about here today is a little bit larger scale. But before we go any further, because we're utilizing terms and terminology that everybody might not understand, maybe we could just go into describing to our listeners and to me. You could describe a little bit about how biodigesters work and how they produce biogas and what some of the basic components are to this process.
Sure. Yeah. So a biodigester, there's a wide variety of devices that can work as a biodigester. And so the core concept is that we need an anaerobic environment. Anaerobic meaning no oxygen getting in. And we typically do that by making a slurry of waste materials. So let's imagine, start with cow manure because it's pretty much the easiest one to work with. But we can imagine cow manure and food waste, other waste materials. We mix them with water to make a slurry, and we want to be at about the thickness of like a pea soup, kind of a, not totally watery, but also not like a chunky stew. So we need it to flow through pipes and pumps. And once you have a slurry, then you can imagine a wide variety of containers that you can put that into, where if your piping is below the water level, your inlet and your outlet piping is below the water level, and you have a sealed container with a gas outlet at the top, then you can imagine waste material can flow into the system, spend some time in there digesting, and then flow back out of the system as effluent. And the gas bubbles will rise up through that liquid column to the top of the liquid and exit the system as biogas. So a biodigester contains microbes, and the microbes are really the ones that are doing the work. There's a couple different classes of microbes in there. They are bacteria and archaea. Archaea are similar to bacteria, but they are a different kingdom of life. And in the biodigester, so waste materials like manure and food waste are first broken down by one group of bacteria that just breaks the big parts into smaller parts. We call this hydrolysis. And they are, if you want to imagine, like, pasta contains carbohydrates, and if we have some old meat in there, it's going to contain proteins and fats. So these first group of microbes are breaking those down into simpler parts that then another group of microbes can work on, and they break them down into organic acids. So kind of down the food chain from a piece of pasta, we're getting down into organic acids. And then another group of microbes will convert that acid into acetic acid or acetate. And then finally, the little guys that we really want in our system are methanogens, and they're archaea. Methanogens take that acetic acid or acetate, and they generate methane. And methane is the burnable part of biogas that we want. So our biogas ends up being a mixture of methane and carbon dioxide. But as long as we have about 58 to 60% methane in that mixture, it's combustible and it can be used as fuel. So the biogas will be formed in little baby bubbles, kind of like the way we would see bubbles coming out of a bottle of soda when we open it. But so there's bubbles of biogas rising up out of the slurry, and they go up into the headspace of the container, and that's where they can be directed to an outlet pipe and to the point of use. After digestion, the material is actually broken down, and some of the solids that were in there are consumed by the microbes, and they end up, being converted from solid into gas. So the carbon that went in with our cow manure, with our food waste, some of that is converted into carbon dioxide and methane and leaves as biogas. But all the good nutrients that we need for our plants, our nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, et cetera, those things actually flow through the digester and come out in the effluent. And what's nice is, if you can imagine, like, raw cow manure is, it's still pretty complicated material, and for that to be used as crop fertilizer, it needs to be broken down by microbes in the soil. Well, what's leaving our digester is pre-digested, so it's actually been broken down somewhat by the microbes, and so our NP and K come out in a more plant bioavailable form, and that's why that digester effluent, or what we call digestate, is really nice as a fertilizer. So how's that for you?
That's a really nice, concise description. And it seems like a very straightforward process. You need you need a container of some sort. You need the feedstocks and the right environment at the right temperature. And you can start producing gas. Oversimplification, but that's basically the system.
Yeah, do you mind if I jump in one more time?
No, go ahead.
Really, people could make a digester at home with any kind of jug, so think, like, if you have a fertilizer jug with a port on the top, that you can thread a fitting into, farmers listening, I know you know what I'm talking about.
Mhm.
Any kind of, like, even a 5-gallon bucket with a screw-on port, just if you can get some way to make a seal on a container. We've also used 55-gallon drums, et cetera. So mix up some cow manure and water, keep it kind of thin so it'll flow, and put that in a sealed container, and put a pipe going out, and then keep that warm, because we're working with cow microbes, so they like to be around cow body temperature, which is around 100 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you can keep it warm, within a couple days, you'll start making burnable gas. Okay, and that if you can capture that gas in a balloon or an inner tube, we even capture it in an inverted bucket, in a larger bucket of water, then you've got burnable gas that you can play with. Of course, we want to be careful with fire, but using common sense, it's really easy to make enough biogas to kind of spark your interest.
Yeah, and it's that kind of a simple system that you could build as an example for yourself at home that kind of would really spark your interest if you did get something like that up and running, I'm sure. So you covered some of the basics about the process, and we also talked about some of the uses for natural gas already, but I wanted to mention a couple more ATRA resources very quickly, and then we can move on to talk about the project that you're working on currently, the larger farm scale biodigester that's going on there. But I wanted to mention the micro scale biogas production ATRA publication. So that's similar to what we were just mentioning as a beginner. It's a beginner's guide, and it has all the basics for designing and managing a small scale system that might be able to provide enough for some of the cooking and heating needs on a farm. And I'll put a link to that as well in the podcast notes. And the other ATRA publication that I wanted to mention is called Anaerobic Digestion of Animal Wastes, Factors to Consider. And that explains the process again of anaerobic digestion, what Matt just went over with you to some extent, and the types of digesters that are out there, the different types that are used, the energy content of biogas, and design factors, and a lot more in that publication if you want to do a little more of a deeper dive. And I'll have a link to that as well in the podcast notes for sure. But that publication talks about larger scale, like farm scale biodigesters, which is what Matt has been working on most recently down at Dickinson College Organic Farm. Could you tell us about the digester that's being built or currently is built on the organic farm down there, and its size, how much gas it produces or is going to produce, and what's the estimated power output that you're thinking that you think will be taking place with the current digester that you're installing?
Yes, of course. So, one of the interesting things about building a farm scale project is, once we're out of the basement or out of the workshop and we're starting to pour concrete, we really want to make sure that we get our design right and base our design on good engineering principles. And that includes, sizing the system to match the waste flow that you expect for your project. And then we need to match the waste flow with the gas output and the energy consumption of the device that's going to use that gas. So that's been a really fun part of this process. What we built here is we've got a 115,000 gallon tank. And so we have a 50-foot diameter round tank. It's a concrete tank buried in the ground, and it's buried about 8 feet deep. And we have 2 feet of freeboard above that. So 8 feet of fluid in that tank, 2 feet of headspace on the top, and then it's got a heavy-duty rubber cover over the top that's it's heavy-duty enough that I can walk on it as it floats on the water. Inside the tank, there is a heating pipe network to keep the digester warm. We've got a mixer and an ejector pump in there. So that's the digester itself, but it's also connected to a waste collection system. So we have a new freestall barn that we put together as part of the project. Our neighbors are partnered with us, and that's Triple L Farm. They're at Land O'Lakes Dairy here in Pennsylvania. What's nice is Dickinson owns the property, and they're a long-term renter. So we were able to invest in the infrastructure and but have their business, they're on site using the cows. So our neighbors have 150 dry cows and heifers on this property, and so the freestall barn is sized for that. And in the barn, connected to the barn, we have a series of collection tanks. So we have 3 10,000-gallon tanks in the ground right there on the end of the freestall barn. And the first one is there to accept the dairy manure that the dairy farm is going to push into that tank every day. The third tank is our food waste collection tank. So we have I mentioned earlier, we do on-farm composting here. So we built this digester system to be using both the food waste from Dickinson College, as well as another about 2 tons per day of food waste from our community. So we're actually sized for up to 3 tons per day of food waste. So our food waste is going to come in, be put into a little conveyor belt and ground with a commercial food waste grinder. And then we'll make a slurry of food waste, pump that over into the cow manure tank, make a combined slurry of food waste and cow manure, and pump that into the digester. So after digestion, the material will come back from the digester to a digestate tank. And we have a third 10,000-gallon tank there where we'll stage that digestate. And then once a day, we'll run that through a solid separator, like a screw press, to squeeze out the manure fibers and use those as bedding in the dairy barn. After digestion, everything, the liquid fraction flows to a large storage tank. It's about a 600,000-gallon storage tank. And that's where we'll stage it for either land application by the dairy farm or pumping over to our compost pad for using as nutrient source for our compost. The digester, that 115,000-gallon digester is sized to match a 50-kilowatt combined heat and power engine. So we were able to come up with a engine out of Europe. The company is called Tetum, and they make combined heat and power, or CHP, engines. And this is a nice size that's adapted to biogas, and it fits our project. So that 50 kilowatts of electricity will first go into our power panel here on the site to power up the farm, and then whatever we don't need here on the farm, we're going to sell back to the utility. So we're already connected to the MedEd utility. Once we're up and running with the engine, we're going to pump that extra electricity back to the grid and get a check for that. So as of right now, everything is built except for the engine. The engine is on a boat from Europe. Once it's here, we've got a little bit of testing and demonstration to learn how to operate it. We expect to be hooked up and operational by about March of this coming year.
Don't have time to stay up to date on the freshest sustainable agriculture news, events, and funding opportunities? You can trust NCAT to keep you connected with our weekly harvest e-newsletter. Subscribe today at ncat.org and get your weekly harvest delivered each Wednesday.
So what's going into this system is the manure from those 130 dry cows and heifers, or thereabouts. 115?
150. Yep.
Oh, 150. And about 3 tons of food waste from the Dickinson College and surrounding area. And what's coming out is those pressed fiber, manure fibers that are going to be used for bedding for those very cows in the system. And you've got the gas production that's going to be producing electricity on the other side. Is there any other, what other byproducts come out of this type of a system that are usable?
Well, after we squeeze those manure fibers out for bedding, we still have the nutrient-rich effluent.
Mm-hmm.
So the liquid fraction has most of the NP and K in there, and so that's going to be land applied as the fertilizer on the dairy side, or we still want the nitrogen for our composting operation. So we're converting from a solid food waste composting to using a liquid digestate as our end source to go with our high carbon leaves and wood chips.
Besides just the gas and electric production, you're getting a nutrient rich source to add to your compost, or for the farmer to add directly to their fields.
Yep. Yeah. And
yeah.
You just want to make sure everybody gets it, that all the nutrients you put in, you get back out, because what's leaving as biogas is carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, and a little bit of sulfur. So everything else is all the good stuff that we would buy otherwise, or that we value in our manure, is staying on the farm.
We've alluded to scale here a little bit in our conversation so far. We talked about micro scale, and then this larger scale project that you're working on right now. I know there are digesters on very large scale dairy farms across the country that are much bigger than what you're working on. What makes this what makes the project that we're talking about here unique in terms of scale?
Yeah, it's definitely that we're on the much smaller scale for the U.S. It's been much more common to see digesters on farms that are 500 cows, 1,000 cows, even like covered lagoons on the big pork farms out in the Midwest. And up until recent decades, it's kind of been the canon or the dogma that you need that many animals to make an economy of scale work, because of the investment that is required for the infrastructure, especially the CHP engine. There's a lot of cost associated with that, and so obviously we need to have enough energy generation to be able to pay for the project in the long term. Now, that's been kind of the dogma here in the States, but in Europe they've been building much smaller digesters for quite a while. So there are little pocket digesters as small as 50 cows being produced in Belgium, and maybe more common is like the 100 to 200 cow dairy in Western Europe. And so we are trying to break the seal on that here for the U.S. And the idea being, that there's about 5,000 dairy farms here in Pennsylvania alone, and the majority of them, like the average size dairy farm in here in Pennsylvania, is 85 cows. So if we can make a digester work on our project with 150 cows plus food waste, we really aim to be a demonstration for other farms in the area, and try to get more of this waste going from how it's being currently handled to an improved handling system that also realizes the energy benefit. So that's the main thing. And to achieve this small scale project, we've had to work pretty hard to find equipment. The CHP engine is not an off-the-shelf item here in the States that we can just go down to the tractor shop and buy one. So we've been really lucky to partner with a firm here in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, Nutrient Control Systems, who has experience importing manure management equipment from Europe, and they were able to build a partnership with this TEDM engine company. They're based out of Germany and the Czech Republic, but now they've opened an office here in Pennsylvania. And so we're really excited to be, we're the test case for a small farm digester engine for TEDM here in the States. And our aim is that, ours is a showcase project that when it works, we're going to show it off to the public and get other people excited about it. The economy of scale is changing because of the incentives that are available right now for digesters, as well as the increasing cost of energy. And so, we're on the transition margin here where energy used to be cheap in this country. And, so by sorting out between the grants and
actual production against estimates and those types of things. in the
Yep.
coming years. Absolutely.
I definitely want to emphasize that this is a showcase project. So
Hmm.
not only, obviously it's my passion project, and, many people here at Dickinson are really excited about it. We're committed to doing the right thing and to being a leader in climate change mitigation by, generating renewable energy and diverting food waste from landfills. But beyond that, we don't want to just do good for, our little neck of the woods. We actually want this to be something that really inspires other farms. And so we're set up with Penn State Extension, with PASA and the Center for Dairy Excellence. Those are some of our partners. And really, we're here, for farmers to come and see, kick the tires on a working digester, talk to me and my students about how these systems work. And so, I really hope that people understand that the Dickinson College Farm is here. If you want to see how a small digester works and whether or not it's feasible for your farm, this is a great place to learn about that.
Yeah, so you really want it to be a showcase and a model for other farms to come and see it in action once it's working, so that they
Yep.
can determine whether it would suit their farming needs or not. And I like that you mentioned the environmental implication. I mean, it's easy to see the environmental benefits from the side of creating, using food waste streams and utilizing the manure on the farm instead of maybe spreading it on frozen ground, for instance, in the middle of winter, where runoff might be an issue. You can see the benefits in managing your waste streams in that way. And you mentioned this gas, but you mentioned this gas as a renewable gas or a carbon neutral gas. You were explaining that to me when I came down to visit you. Could you kind of just explain why biogas that's produced in this way could be considered a carbon neutral gas?
Sure. Yeah, sure. So we all use energy. We need energy for our operations. And if we're combusting something to make that energy, we're going to generate some carbon dioxide. When we burn coal or oil or natural gas, the carbon that becomes carbon dioxide when we combust it is, coming from underground, right? So that carbon is not currently in the atmosphere if it's, let's say coal. And when we burn that coal, we're taking carbon from under the Earth's surface and putting it up in the sky. And that's gradually leading to increases in the carbon blanket that keeps our Earth warm, and it's making the Earth warmer. So that's the challenge with fossil fuels that I think we're all aware of. When we burn a biofuel like biogas, the carbon originated in the air. If we think about it, what's going into our digester? It's cow manure and it's food waste. And food waste is essentially an agricultural byproduct, right? And so if I've got pasta going in my digester, or I've got a lettuce peel, what have you, those are all plant materials that were recently grown on farms. So when we grow feed for our cows, or we grow food materials for humans, all those plants are taking the carbon that they need to grow from the air, right? They're not getting their carbon from the soil. Through photosynthesis, they are grabbing carbon dioxide from the air and making plant biomass. And so if we take that plant biomass that used to be in the air, and now we turn it into methane, which is an energy-rich molecule, and we combust that methane, it becomes the exhaust of our engine is going to generate CO2, carbon dioxide. But that carbon that is part of that carbon dioxide was already in the air to begin with. So we're just moving carbon from the air through a plant into a cow, or right into the digester as food waste, generating some methane, burning that methane, putting out carbon dioxide, putting it back in the air. And the energy that's making all that go is really, it's the sun. The sun powered the plant that organized the stuff into biomass. The microbes convert that biomass into methane. We burn it, release that energy, and use it for making our electricity in this case, or heating our home or doing our cooking. And then so it is, it's a renewable cycle that's driven by the sun, and it's carbon neutral in that way.
Really nice to be able to understand it in those terms as a carbon neutral gas production system. We know that the advantages to farmers that this type of system offers is they're able to manage their nutrients on their farm, their manure on their farm in a environmentally sound way, and they have byproducts like the bedding in the case of your system that's being produced, and the actual gas production and electric production, as well as the nutrients that are maintained to be able to spread on the field. So there's just a lot of there's some management that goes into these systems, but there's a lot of advantages to them as well.
Sure. And we're also, we're helping with climate change, not just by generating renewable energy, but when we keep food waste out of the landfill, food waste in a landfill produces methane where we don't want it in a landfill. And that some of that methane ends up in the atmosphere as a powerful greenhouse gas. Also, if dairy or pork farmers have an open manure pit, where they're just pushing their liquid manure into, and it's open to the environment, those are actually really, really bad for the air because they're bubbling out biogas all day long, and that biogas, if we can capture it and use it as an energy source, it's very valuable. If we just let it go into the air, it's a pollutant, so farms that take a open manure pit and they convert it into a digester, or they add a digester before that manure pit, they can get double credit in the carbon intensity scoring of their energy, and that's really valuable. So people are actually investing in those projects quite a bit in the West. So yeah, there's so many environmental benefits, that come along with the digester, that it's like we can solve a bunch of different problems with one solution.
I was hoping to just you touched on this earlier. You mentioned something about the availability of some certain types of funding sources. Do you have any specific sources that you can mention that
Sure.
could fund a project like this?
Yeah, absolutely. So people should really talk to their USDA agent, and in particular, the Natural Resource Conservation Service, NRCS. That would be my first place I would recommend people start. Is like, for your county, wherever you are in the U.S., there should be a NRCS office that services that county. And USDA NRCS has a couple different grant programs. The one that we tapped into is called the EQIP, or Environmental Quality Incentive Program. And one of the practices that they fund with the EQIP is digester projects. So if you want to get in with the USDA, you're going to need to get a conservation plan, but NRCS will develop a conservation plan for you at no cost. What they do is they look at your farm operation, they have a conversation with you, and they say, well, these are the resource concerns that we see here. Maybe we want to see a better manure management system that keeps this manure out of the stream, out of a waterway. And if they can justify a project on those grounds, then they can fund, up to like $250,000 or more through EQIP. And that's a really nice program, and it doesn't take a ton of work to get it, just some paperwork and a little bit of time to coordinate. But those are definitely low-hanging fruit. Also, through USDA is the REAP program, and I believe that's Renewable Energy for America program. We weren't able to tap that one because we're a nonprofit, but any private farm or small business that's involved in farming is eligible for REAP, and that's another funding source that can be up to like 30% of the project cost. So that could even be more than $250,000, depending on what your total project cost is. Again, you would probably tap into that by talking to your either farm service agency or your NRCS agent through USDA. Then I would talk to your Department of Agriculture in your state, and as well as your Department of Environmental Management, or here in Pennsylvania, we've got the Department of Environmental Protection. So we tapped into both. Pennsylvania has the Resource Enhancement Assistant Program through the Department of Ag. We tapped into that for some funding. We also tapped into a program called the Conservation Excellence Grant Program, and that's associated with Chesapeake Bay. So our project is helping to improve water quality in the Chesapeake Bay by cleaning up an old manure management problem, and making a new solution. So those are both the Department of Ag, and then our Department of Environmental Protection has funding for projects that reduce food waste in the landfill. So we've got some funding that way as well. And some of these can be quite generous, and the application process is, in my opinion, not that arduous. We also have other funding through our project with a local energy company, the Sustainable Energy Fund here in Pennsylvania. And so those ones take a little bit more work. I do spend a lot of time grant writing, but some of our sponsors include Constellation Energy, their Energy to Educate program, as well as the MetEd Sustainable Energy Fund here of Berks County of Pennsylvania. I have other funders, but they might not necessarily be available to to other farms, but I do encourage you to just take a look at your local foundations and see who's out there. One of ours is a local grocery store, Giant Corporation has been helping us out. So you never know where you might find some funding if you have time to look for it. And to me, we brought in over $1 million in foundation and government funding for this project just by beating the bushes and spending some time on that fundraising.
Wow, thanks for mentioning all of those resources, and we'll try to get access and links to those in the notes to this podcast for sure. Matt, it's been wonderful talking to you today. I really appreciate your time. I'd like to thank you for the work you're doing with farm energy and clean energy production down at Dickinson College Organic Farm there, and I just thank you for sharing your time and expertise with us today. You've given our listeners a lot to think about, I think. So thank you.
Well, thank you, Chris. And if you don't mind, I'll plug our YouTube channel. If you were to punch in Dickinson College Farm Biogas into YouTube search engine, you get a playlist of all kinds of stuff we've developed that gives you a visual to go along with this conversation. But I really appreciate the opportunity to share and your interest and your support of our project as well.
It's great for us to be able to showcase what you're doing down there and hopefully expand it to get it in front of a wider audience across the country.
Appreciate the opportunity.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening. Additional information about this episode and related resources can be found at atra.ncat.org. Don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Voices from the Field wherever you get your podcasts. I'm your host, Rich Myers. ATRA, Voices from the Field, is produced by the National Center for Appropriate Technology, headquartered in Butte, Montana. It's supported by the USDA Rural Business Cooperative Service as part of NCAT's ATRA Sustainable Agriculture Program. Any opinions, findings, conclusions, or recommendations expressed in this recording are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of the USDA or NCAT. We'll catch you again next week, and until then, keep on farming.